I would like to welcome everyone into this space today, and very excited to be speaking about team building and how do we hold and create generative space for teamwork. So I will now just invite us all to land, take a moment to stop and land in our bodies, whether it's morning or afternoon or evening. Perhaps some of us have already had a very busy day. So let's take a moment to just breathe together and center ourselves so that we can come into this conversation bringing our full awareness. So you might wish to lower your eyes, lower your gaze, perhaps close your eyes. I invite you to feel your feet on the ground, resting on this solid, good Mother Earth, and notice what sort of energy are you carrying in this moment? How are you arriving in this virtual room today? Has it been busy? Has there been conflict? Are you arriving breathless or peaceful? And just stay with how you're feeling without judging, just noticing. And breathe. And what's the inner vibration you're carrying just now? Try and reconnect, meet with your body. Let's notice any parts that might be tight. Is there anything in our limbs, in our chest, anything asking to be noticed? And let's breathe and send energy to those parts and a bit of loving attention. And let's remember our bodies. And today we're using our ears in particular now, which will heighten some of our senses. Breathe, scan your inner landscape. What's present with you? What emotions? What thoughts, intentions? Breathe in and breathe out. And feel your head connected to the open sky, upwards, and feel your heart energy extending outwards or horizontally towards the others in this room, all around the world. And breathe again. And think of all of us as interconnected in a web, concentric circles of connection, influence, inspiration. And now take 3 more deep breaths, inhaling in and out. And last inhale and exhale. And thank you for reconnecting your thoughts and your body. So my name is Rachel. I am in Rome, Italy, and I will be hosting this room today with my co-moderators Michelle and Anastasia, and we have the great pleasure today of welcoming Eva and Florentina, who will be holding this topic revolving around generative space and teamwork. And first of all, I would like to open inviting each of you in turn to say 2 words about yourselves, your location, what are you tending right now, and maybe what are you bringing into the space today with you. And I will first of all invite Anastasia, who will then pass it on to Michelle, and then Florentina, and then Eva. Over to you, Anastasia. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel, and I'm so glad to be with you, and it's so warm for me. I'm from Moscow, from Russia, and today very cold day, not spring day, and so for me it's very important to be with you, because when I stay with our team, I feel more warm when in our streets now. I think it's a very important topic because in now time, in current reality, it's so important to understand how we can work together, how we can create this generative space in our teamwork. Because now the only one person, the only one man can't do real important and deep things. So thank you so much, Eva and Flo, for this topic, and I'm very glad to see you here. And Michelle, and I'm done speaking. I'm Anastasia from Moscow, Russia.
I'm calling from South Africa. I think probably two words that come to mind for me showing up on this call is pace and balance. I'm really excited to be talking about generative spaces today, because this is very much for me a generative space. I find myself increasingly enjoying more of these types of conversations about things that are important to me, but also that can feed my balance and my pace. So my social media is taking on the form of these types of conversations that are two-way and engaging, as opposed to just feeding what I'm seeing, whether it be visually or just reading. And that's me. I'm done speaking. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Michelle and Florentina. Before I pass it on to you, I would just like to, I forgot to remind everyone, the session is being recorded, so for the benefit of those who are not able to join us today. And so please make note of that and do not speak if you do not wish to be recorded. And over to you, Florentina.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Michelle and Anastasia, also for creating this space and opportunity for Eva and I also to just be on this inquiry with you all. So I'm Florentina, and I'm based here in Belgium, Brussels. I'm from Belgium, originally from Kosovo. And maybe just a few words on who I am. Maybe not everyone is aware. So I am part of the Presencing Institute for the last 4 years now, and I have a role of program manager, team manager, project manager. I never know exactly which word to use for our online free courses like ULab 1X, ULab 2X, our Gaia program as well. But I also sit in the management team, and that's where I get to look also at the evolution and the emergence of our network, ecosystem, organization. I also never know really how to phrase this, which I also think is partially saying a lot about our organization and roles in the organization. And I think what I bring today is just a little bit of personal story and this inquiry that I would love to be on with you all. I'll pass it on to Eva. I'm done speaking. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Florentina, and everyone. Thank you, Rachel, Michelle, and Anastasia, for hosting this call. I'm Eva. I'm here in Montreal, Canada, which might also be called Tiohtià:ke on Turtle Island. My role at the Presencing Institute is I work as the research lead and on the faculty of ULab. I'm also sitting in a very chilly location in the world, and looking forward to being warmed by the conversation. And I think what I bring in is just some excitement, because I feel like what we're about to do in this conversation is try and make visible and try and articulate something that's absolutely essential in our working together, but something for which we don't yet have sort of adequate words. We don't have ways of talking about holding generative spaces. And I think it's something that this community can really can really serve systems change in this way, by coming up with language that helps people see and understand the role of holding generative spaces in our work, and bring language to it. So very much looking forward to the conversation, and I'm finished speaking.
Thank you very much, Eva and Florentina, for introducing yourselves, and welcome to anyone who has just joined. We are now going to inquire with Florentina and Eva into the topic of generative space in teamwork. And I wonder which of the two of you would like to kick off, maybe with sharing a story, perhaps, or an experience. Florentina, I think perhaps you would like to open the discussion.
Sure, thanks Rachel, and thanks Eva as well. I always think you have such clarity in your words, and you always just bring to me a lot of clarity also in sometimes what I am trying to inquire. So it's also a great combo for people probably. I just want to go back to why actually are we here, and what is it that why is it that Eva and I are here inquiring in this holding generative space for team. And I just want to share a little bit of my personal story and link to this topic. So my interest in this is born pretty much at the same time as we launched our ULAB 2X actually initiative 3 years ago. And maybe because I know maybe not everyone here knows about what is, the ULAB 1X or what is the ULAB 2X or the courses that we give. So I will just say a few words around what that is. So the 1X course is something that we give from September through December, and it is something that dives into the fundamentals of Theory U. But we also give there methods and tools to develop self-awareness and awareness of the systems around us. We try usually to answer those very simple questions of who is myself and what is my work with a big W. So basically it is about listening deeply to your individual source of creativity and innovation. So that's for 1X. While ULAB 2X, so 3 years ago we created this course from February through May, is an awareness-based process that is tailored for teams that wants to bring an idea into action. So it's more of a team process, when the first part of the year is more of an individual process. So while finding your own source of creativity and generative space as a leader, and on an individual level can already be difficult, right? I mean, we all know that. But finding that source and that generative space while maintaining the team is a whole new other level, right? And so as we say, if sometimes, you think you're calm and grounded and collected, and you feel oh yeah, I found, my source, and I feel very cool. Usually I say, just go spend one day, at Christmas with your family, and then you discover pretty much that you still probably need a lot of practice to become a black belt in those practices, basically. And that's a little bit what came for me. I was oh wow, there is this whole individual path and source and generative space that makes a lot of sense on an individual level, but then when we transpose it into a team, it becomes a whole new just field and game, and much more difficult to achieve. So at the same time as I was seeing that for the teams within the 2X process that were really, really struggling with the process, and not at all really with the process, but actually with each other and as a team in their dynamic, I was also myself growing into my own role in Presencing Institute, and I was also shifting my way of being aware of my own team and growing as a professional really in the system. And I was just seeing that the team, my team, and the way we were struggling were pretty much similar to like the team in the 2X process and their struggle. So the make or break deal, so to speak, for a prototype to come to life and actually to have an impact was often found in the team dynamic and the generative space that they were able to nurture and to maintain throughout the process. So I was like, just how do you actually presence of others while getting things done, and actually that leads to some concrete actions. So then my own focus in my own work started to shift from being extremely enthusiastic about the work that we were doing in the world, and I wanted to be so much connected to the community out there and our participants. And I find myself more and more paying attention to actually my own holding capabilities and the well-being of my own organization and my own team, basically, and try to understand through us, through also me, what are those specific qualities that shift the field towards generative interaction between the people and also towards generative actions. As a side note, like just a couple of hours ago, actually, a coworker, Stefan, just texted me and he said, I got some feedback that some of the 2X teams, so they are in the process right now, are really struggling, has teams in their dynamics. Some are collapsing, some are really struggling with that dynamic. And so that's really the inquiry that we have right now is really real. Why some teams are making it, why some not, and would there be something that could actually help that to shift? So it's a genuine inquiry that we have in PI has ourselves for our own team, and then also with the 2X process. And we have our own kind of bits and pieces of thoughts around like what helps and what not, of course. But like for me, what was really important, and I know also for Eva, was really this collective inquiry. We're like, why not put this question out there and really see if we're just crazy us here out there, or there are other people also thinking along the same lines and have experience to share with us, so we can actually start to put some words into this role of holding generative space for teams. So that's a bit the idea for today. And I will leave it here and pass it on to Eva, who will add a few more thoughts before we go into a conversation with you guys. Thank you. I'm done speaking.
Thanks, Florentina. And I love that framing, because what you're really doing for me is you're lifting up this role, which is all about holding the team, right? And I think that's where I am excited to get into the conversation and excited to hear about people's experiences. And again, as I was saying, bring words to this role. I think what I'll do, I'd like to first just kind of helicopter up a little bit to something from research and then come back down to personal experience. And this research piece, I want to share just because it's an experience I had, and I just found it so cool. In that, so my ULab hub, we had some research integrated into our hub, and so we were starting to do some writing about holding space, and went into the literature to say, does this term or this concept appear anywhere in the research in any field? And what we found is that the concept of holding space came up in psychology, in theater, in education, in organizational development, and in midwifery, right? Which I just loved. I thought, well, that's not even a metaphor. I mean, that's literally bringing something new into, to life, or bringing the new into being. And so when we did this search and found this term kind of just popping up on the fringes of all these disciplines, it said two things to me. So first, it said this isn't sort of a discipline-specific idea or concept. This is a human need we have when we come together to create, right? So having space held for us, generative space held for us, is a need that we have. That was one thing. that just seems to be so clear. And then the other was the fact that it was on just kind of the fringes of all these different disciplines, which really struck me a bit, connecting to the opening comments I was making, that we don't have a way of speaking about this role and about this experience of holding or being held in a way that really allows it to become visible, that might allow organizations to kind of prioritize it, direct resources towards it. So it's both essential and it's unseen. And I think on a very personal level, so I had the experience of holding space, but actually I think in this conversation what's more relevant is the experience of being held, because Florentina, you hold the team, I'm a team member, so I get to be held by your sort of, we might call it management, but holding of the team. And we did have an experience in the last year when you had to step away for a bit. And I think there's never, an experience that makes the invisible so visible as when you're missing something, right? Where you've had something and it suddenly disappears. And all of a sudden, my work, which had felt so connected and so embedded in a team, felt really siloed. I really felt like, wow, I'm really working on my own here, and working hard to try and figure out where my place is in this bigger project and endeavor and organization. And so that really, that was quite a painful experience, but really helpful in starting to be able to kind of see and articulate what is holding, and particularly holding a generative space for a team. So maybe that would be the last thing. We can hold generative spaces for individuals to come together for powerful experiences, and that's an important part of our work. But teams are so interdependent, right? And they're so invested in the work that they're doing, that I think holding generative spaces for teams is a particular maybe skill set. And what I would love to do at this point in the conversation is kind of to hand over, it could be within our team or with people here listening in on the conversation, just to hear more about your experiences of either holding or being held, and either when it's working and joyful, what's happening, or what are the challenges in it, and what happens when, what's the experience of it maybe not going as well, and the learning that comes from that. And so I'm finished speaking there, and just would like to hand it out to the group.
Thank you so much, Eva, for sharing your thoughts about that. And I was wondering, Géraud, would you like to speak to that? Because I know you need to leave soon, and perhaps you'd like to speak to this question Eva put out to us. What's joyful for you and what's challenging with regards to teamwork? Oh, Géraud, are you able to speak? Perhaps I was... perhaps you're busy, or anyone else would who's on stage. Michelle, would you like to speak?
Yeah, I'm super happy to jump in. I think Eva and Florentina have just opened up such a beautiful conversation. I never knew what it meant to hold space, much less be held, until the guide journey. And I was introduced to coaching circles. And I guess for me, such a great story for me, and I think that also just speaks to generative listening and my own literacy in that space is, so I started getting actively involved in my coaching circle, and they've been holding space for me for over a year. And they're from all over the world, from Singapore to the Netherlands to New Zealand to Geneva, literally from all over. And as a result of being held for, week on week for the last maybe 14 months, I was able to put the organization that I work for during the day into a very empowered, successful, exponential growth position, which is really, really rare for a financial services business that was going through the pandemic. but it also gave me the capacity to hold space for others. And it gave me so much more capacity to not only hold space, but also to be creative. So this idea of groups of individuals holding space for you so that you can almost go and take a bath from the toxicity of living in a world for the most part that is absent, and then being a space holder for individuals who are also in need of that bath to cleanse themselves from the toxicity just creates this really beautiful circular experience of life. I think I'm probably one of a few people. I don't think that there are large volumes of people who are thriving in this pandemic. And you know, I'm really super grateful to have been introduced to this concept of generative space and just seeing how much it can give to teams, to myself, and really just create so much capacity in systems and in organizations and teams and individuals. I don't think enough people know what it means. And I really just want to encourage people to dig a little deeper into this idea of what we're talking about this evening. And that's me. I'm done speaking. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you, Michelle. And Géraud, over to you. I think you've sorted out your headphone problems if you'd like to chime in. Oops, it looks like your headphone problems. So while you try and solve your headphone problems, I'll just do a quick room reset for those of you who might have just stepped in. Today we're talking about generative space in teamwork. We are recording the sessions for reshare to non-iOS users. And when invited to speak, please use the convention of opening by saying your name and location, and say I'm done speaking when you're done speaking. And please, if anything is resonating from you, from what you've heard so far, raise your hand so that we can invite you onto the stage to speak. And I see Géraud, I think you may have jumped off and back on again. Are you ready to speak? Yes, great.
Oh, I'm seeing. Yeah, okay, excellent.
Good.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened, but it worked to close the app and open it again. I'm sitting with what Michelle said about a sort of a cleansing bath to cleanse the toxicity that can exist in space, and more broadly, your closing note on how much this is not a skill that we necessarily know to see in the world. And I feel as though my eyes have been opened to it a little bit this year from the experience of being a part of a team that has been very expertly held. And now I set my eyes on a lot of other social systems. I think of my family, for one example, to the point that you made, Florentina, about going home when you think that you've got things figured out. And so really I'm appreciating how important this is. I guess the one thing that's coming up for me is that I think part of cleansing that toxicity, again, to use that language, I think is in letting it out. And something that I have experienced being a part of the ULab team is a comfort with being honest with each other, is a comfort with voicing what's on our minds and making that a norm from the get-go. I feel as though we often open our conversations with check-ins that are real and honest about asking one another what it is that we are bringing into the space. And I feel as though we don't shy away from speaking the dissonance that we feel if we think that dissonance is important to be paid attention to. And sometimes that means airing conflict. Sometimes that means not being afraid to cry in a meeting, which is certainly not something that I had experience of before. And I'm very grateful to the team members who have modeled that kind of vulnerability, because it means that when I feel my attention beginning to drift from the work that we are doing as a team, because there's some wedge that's getting in the way of my understanding my place, of my connecting with the broader goals that we're working together, we are able to focus our attention on what that is, and learn from that, rather than say, no, there's no room for that, and your personal stuff, set that to the side, and we need to move forward on what we've agreed together. So there is a kind of a constant revisiting and a welcoming of dissonance. That was what I wanted to share. Thank you. This is Géraud, and I'm done sharing.
Thanks so much, Géraud. I love this this concept you spoke to about modeling vulnerability and how that opens up the space of possibility to connect. And so it means also showing up sometimes raw and aching. And yes, I think it's very inspiring when we model that for each other, because when you see a team member doing it, then it sort of opens up a space of permission for others to do that. And it does, I think the dissonance does shake up spaces in a good way, because it takes us out of, pretending or just going through the motions as though everything is fine. And I think facing it squarely, it can be really awkward and really uncomfortable, but it does then clear the space for something deeper. And I would like to just remind the audience to raise your hand if there's anything that comes up for you, insights, a story you want to share, or questions you would like to ask any of our panelists. And I wonder, Anastasia, is there anything you would like to add to what's been said, or speak to Eva's question?
Maybe Eva questions now, because now I want to think a little bit about Géraud words, and thank you so much, Géraud, for your opinion and about point of honesty. I think maybe Eva has question to Flor.
Sure, yeah, so it's Eva here. So I'm thinking about being a team and in a generative space, and just thinking, sort of asking myself, how do I know when I'm in a generative space? And that's a question I would love to ask to people here too. Like, how do you know what's going on when you'd say, yes, I'm in a generative space? And I'm thinking about a recent meeting that we had, and that one of the characteristics would be that the outcome of that meeting was entirely not what I was anticipating or expecting going in, but in the course of the conversation, something happens. I can't say, where this idea started, where it continued. It just, suddenly we're in the dialogue, something new is happening, there's an energy, and we're moving with it. And so I'm thinking about the scenario, and I know, Florentina, because of the role that you have and the way that you work, that you're actively a part of making those moments happen, right? Of creating those the conditions for those generative spaces and generative dialogues. And I guess I would love to hear you share a little bit about, what's happening inside of you, right, to help co-create those spaces. And what is it that you're actually doing? Because I think you're quite active, both kind of before and during those experiences. And I was wondering, in an effort to articulate what holding space is all about, if you could talk a little bit about, what the work that you do to create generative spaces for us. This is Eva, and I'm finished speaking.
Oh my God, Eva. So that's a big question, and I don't even know that I have an answer. That's why I'm here having an inquiry with everyone, and I'm really happy that I see Alex coming in as well. So hopefully we can hear what you have to say as well. I will try to articulate maybe just a few thoughts, but it's really just an inquiry, because I have also no idea. And to be totally honest, I actually emailed my coworkers a few weeks back, and I was like, hey guys, what is it that I do? Very honestly, Rachel can attest that, Eva as well. I was just like, guys, I understand that there is something, that I'm doing, and really I don't know exactly what that is. I think also, just to say that, like, when Géraud does talk about the modeling, you know, of honesty, and he talks about crying, I am the crier in the team, so I'm the manager, but I'm the one who cries the most, I think, in this team as well. And so I think that's what you were probably referring to as well. And the way it works for me is that I can't really explain it, and that's the reason why I'm having so much difficulty being here, and I'm looking for people to put words on how I'm feeling, because it actually is a little bit of a being really, really present to the team, and knowing my people in the team so very well that actually even throughout the screen, because also we need to say to people probably that we're not even live when we meet, we're through a screen, right? Like, so it's like a Zoom meeting or something like that. And it's a way of holding the space where I have to be consciously not part of the dynamic that is at play. So I'm really looking and focusing on what is the possibility, always, without looking away from the problems, obviously. So I think what I also need to do is that every time there is like an elephant, even though it's not an elephant, it's a very small something, a little rock in your shoe, but it still hurts, I'm going to speak it. Like, I'm going to be the one that needs to name it or speak it or something like that. And so I try to stay with the possibility and to stay with the people that are really in the room for them. And I will be totally honest, sometimes, and lately actually, what I have been struggling with that, and the question that I'm holding is that then it means that I feel sometimes voiceless, you know, in this. Sometimes I feel like, oh great, okay, like the only way I can hold this generative for others to be creative, to grow and to grow, is for me to not have opinions, so to speak, but actually stay with this generative space. And I said earlier to Eva that, like, the way I make decision is like listening to the field, to what is in the middle of us. So that's the generative, the decision making. Actually, the decision maker is in between all of us. And so, yeah, I mean, sorry, like it's so much an inquiry for me that, like, I'm literally making these thoughts as I'm talking. So I would love some help. No, thank you. I'm done speaking.
Thanks, Florentina. That's showing up with vulnerability. Hats off to you. And we have two people on stage. So I wonder, Alex, is there something you would like to speak to from what Florentina said?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, loud and clear.
Perfect. Yeah, so, I mean, I have, by the way, I'm Alex. I'm coming to you from London. I'm originally from Vancouver, Canada. I just have some kind of general comments about partially what Flo went into, but also what Eva talked about. I've just seen the poor signal. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can. We hear you well.
Ah, great. Yeah, so what I'm reflecting on, and this is very much related to the U shape, and it's just an idea that I'd love to kind of inject into the stage and into the conversation around the story of a seed and the process with a seed's development that bring it from basically being an idea for something, a genetic blueprint, all the way into becoming an organism and what that means. And I think this is very much related. The metaphor is quite useful potentially to this idea of generative space in teamwork, because really at the beginning of an organism's life, when it's still a dry seed, its membrane has to be firm, it has to be unyielding, it has to be secretive. The seed at this stage holds something precious, and it needs to be protected. And during this period, it's a period of dreaming. It's a period of profound internal listening. there's a word, autarky, which is related to the word, the morpheme for autism, autos, which is the state of being economically closed. And it's at this stage when the seed must remain dormant, it must remain closed in order to be, until it's ready to meet the cosmopolitan, complex nature of the soil. Now, at this stage, the seed can remain dormant for forever, theoretically, but if it's to germinate, if it's to mature into an organism, if it's to meet the world, if it's to participate in a co-creative way, its membrane must become porous. It must become partially inoculated by complexity. Now, of course, it needs to hold on to its original idea. That's what it's bringing to the group. But it needs to, that membrane has to become porous in order for the journey from seed to organism to happen. So upon like imbibing water and kind of quote unquote discovering the soil, the seed then wakes up and begins to acquire an ecological identity. It's no longer a seed at this point, but a plant. It's capable of giving back to its community, interacting with the soil and the complex nature of that soil. And the journey, as I see this, and it's something that I've seen in both Theory U and structures such as liberating structures, where you're asked as an individual to pause, to reflect, to go deep, and then come with that deeper self, that deeper reflection to the group. And that's how I see it. I see the movement from seeds to that germination stage as a movement from inherence to coherence. So from seed, where there's an inherent identity, to germination, where there's a coherent identity. The way I've described it is, I'm going to use that term autism again, soul, like that which means self, basically, which is the core of the self. To me, this reflects the requirement of life and the generative vital impulse to be initially protected from all outside influence in order to express inherence and know freedom, whereas ecology, which is the state, fundamental state of an organism, reflects the requirement of life to be in relationship with other life in order to express coherence and to know belonging. This comes down to a very famous phrase in systems biology, which is, and just complexity generally, by Mai Wan Ho, the physicist, which is maximum freedom to the parts, maximum coherence to the whole. And that's the pull and the push and pull of all complex adaptive systems. But I just find that really interesting, this move, and I'd love to hear what other people think about, in terms of generative space, this harvesting of that profound internal listening that belongs to the seed stage, that inherent stage, and then bringing that, making that membrane porous at the germination stage, where we start to cohere with others. And then we move into this complex stage where we become an organism effectively. There's one quote which I'd love to leave with, and then I'll finish, which is by the theoretical physicist from Milan, Shantina Agostino Sabadini. The individual is no longer described, but is understood in relation to the collective with which it co-creates a rhythm. You could no longer identify an individual without relating it to a collective pattern. And to me, that's the state of generative space. Individual in a community, they're both inoculating each other. I'm Alex, and I'm done speaking.
Wow, Alex, thank you so much. This was a beautiful analogy and very powerful. It was, for me, slightly puzzling in the beginning. I was thinking, where's he going with this? And it's so potent. And the seed being rigid and first actually hermetic, and then what it takes for it to become porous and open up. I'm just sitting with the richness of that. And I wonder, Andy, is there something you would like to connect to your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm glad I was able to make it. I often have a conflict during this time. Yeah, we have a couple things together, and I'll start there. This is Andy speaking. I'll start there. I really appreciate that, Alex, in the context of having a container. And I like the way you talked about it, and in this broader sense of holding space. that's something I've discovered that is so incredibly important. I mean, as much as the space itself, I think what's inside the space is often just quite fluid and emergent and stepping beyond what I think a lot of the conscious state, at least my experience is. And yet what makes that possible is that firm membrane, is that, and I think there's ways to construct that. Maybe I'll offer a couple of tangible things that I think are really important in the context of holding space. But I do, and I think it's taken me a while to discover that. I mean, for my personal journey as an empath and being highly energetically sensitive, but not really having any training or awareness of any of that until the last few years, it was really quite confusing because I think my membrane was porous and I was just letting all this energy in, and it got very confusing and felt almost like assaulting at times. And so that's how I think it shows up for me personally. I love this conversation. I've spent the last several years exploring the art of holding space, building a network of and for space holders. And so I've had the benefit of kind of cross-referencing numerous practices. And there are, including the Presencing Institute, of course. I think you're one of the leaders. So to me, one of the most important qualities, I think, around that container are shared agreements. A shared sense of why are we here, and a sense of shared agreements. And ideally, to me, it relates directly to co-creation and collaboration, that we're all creating those together. And Priya Parker talks about this in an interesting way, because she, talks about this in the context of inclusion and exclusion. I know that was a topic here a couple of weeks ago. And this idea that actually, to be inclusive, you do have to be at least a bit exclusive, right? For that container to have integrity and to mean something, it inherently is not something else. So I think sometimes that can seem like it's in conflict, because maybe, we want to kind of invite everybody in. We want to be open to everybody, but that might actually disrupt or disturb or somehow violate, the people who are on the inside. And to me, one of the reasons I think this practice is so important is, my future vision for the world is where we have space, and a lot of that's for emotional processing, right? We're just the average person we meet on the street. We've got space to go beyond the sort of, hi, how are you doing? But or if there's, maybe we're in a working group and there's a big emotional reaction, and we have just trained ourselves that it's natural to offer that some space to breathe and to process. And that, I think, is one of the main things, at least, I'm in America, in the West, that we don't offer a lot of space. We just sort of tend to compress lots and lots of things together. So I'm Andy, and I'm complete.
Thank you so much, Andy. I would like to invite Aftab to take the mic.
Thanks, Rachel, and hello, everyone. And hello, Eva. I sort of met you on a panel a couple of weeks ago.
Hi, nice to see you.
And haven't met anyone else who I see on the phone here. So one observation, or really one reflection, is that we could observe what has gone on in this conversation so far. I only joined about 10 minutes after it began. So I've been doing that, and I'll just say that the conversation exemplifies, is congruent with its topic. And that's rare enough that I'm really appreciating that. And the question that interests me in this moment would be to unpack what we mean, not in an abstract way, but in an experiential way. What's the experience of holding? What's the experience of generativity? And in some ways, most importantly, what's the experience of space? This is Aftab, and I'm done speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Aftab. I love your question because I was also earlier when Eva asked, how do I know when I'm in a generative space and something that was coming up inside me was like, how does the body feel when the field is generative? And so I'd like to kind of add that layer to it and perhaps invite Willie to speak.
Thank you, Rachel. This is Willie. I'm coming from Querétaro, Mexico, and it's interesting. I was just thinking about that question too, and how do we feel, or how do we know that the space we are it's generative? And it jumped to my mind. I've heard maybe not a couple of years ago, more than that, but Alfie Kohn, who is one specialist in education with a very clear and strong point of view about how the current education system works around the world, but he was pointing at some kind of methodology which is called self-determination theory, and it talks around how can we build communities that are really can perform in a better way, and this theory is based on three principles that what they propose is exactly how people need to feel when working on a team, and it's called the ABC method. The A comes from I just forgot the word. The A comes from I'm going to go with the B and the C, and I'll return to the A. The B is for belonging. You need to feel you're part of something bigger, and you need to feel that you're doing something with others and to feel part of something. The C is from competence, which is that actually you know what your work, and just like Florentina was telling with capital W, and which is your competence that you are bringing to that group. And the A comes from, and give me a couple of seconds, it is, I just can't remember, but it goes like a little bit of freedom, that you can move in that group, feeling that you can give something to the group and that you can move with your competences. So I have been using that ABC method whenever I'm in a group, and trying to feel myself if I'm feeling that in my body, if I know that I have competence, that I can belong, and if I can feel free to move and to propose things. And also when I am managing teams, I try to do it as well, and maybe there's a path over there for trying to answer the question that you just have proposed, and I have finished speaking.
To jump in for a second, I think the A is autonomy.
Autonomy, yeah. Thank you. Autonomy, yeah.
Thanks, Alex. Tumi-san, hello.
Hi, my name is Tumi-san. I'm calling from South Africa. So I must say, hearing everything, being part of the team, because we also isolated during these COVID times. When I heard Florentina speak, and she was saying how, as a manager, she's the one who cries. I feel like, as a woman, listening to her say that, imagine if my manager said, this is a safe space for you to cry, let it all out, because we spend more than half of our days at work. So it's important when you're part of a team to be a team that you feel like, oh my gosh, you're making contribution and you're being heard, and you can be yourself. You don't have to pretend to be hard and stuff. So being part of a team and being generative space, you see it about how you belong, how you feel, what's your worth. Thank you. This is Tumi-san from South Africa. I'm done speaking.
Thank you very much, Tumi-san. We have Ivona now on the stage with us, and also I invite, since there are not so many of us on stage, if anything, so we'll give Ivona the mic, and then whoever wants to build on what's being said, please just jump in.
Thank you, Rachel. Hi, everyone. My name is Ivona. I'm based in Zurich, Switzerland. I just would like to say thank you to all of you. Thank you for sharing all of the wonderful, wonderful stories, especially the one exactly around being accepted by the teams or by the team for who someone really is, and giving everyone the space to be that person. So I think that's something yet to be developed in the world on the daily, so we can enjoy that on the daily basis. But there is a huge potential, and also thank you to the whole Presencing Institute for teaching us this type of skills. I'm done speaking. Thank you.
Thanks, Ivona. Eva, I think you had an inspiration.
Yeah, I just want to jump in with a small comment, and I think particularly related to the last two comments about really showing up as authentically yourself in a workspace. And I think because, I've had the pleasure of having conversations with you, Florentina, about the nature of the work and the nature of your work. I think there are two things that I know that you do that really make that space a place where I feel like I can come in really genuinely. And they are, one, I know that you believe deeply in the genius of everyone, right? That everyone has their genius and it just needs the right conditions to be expressed. And I know you also hold a lot of love for us all. And so for me, to be able to be in a workspace that is underpinned by a belief in my genius and by love is just, it's the most precious of my professional experiences, my entire career. And I think that really underpins a generative team space. And I'm finished speaking.
Thanks, Eva. Flo, I see you unmuted, please.
Yeah. So I was gonna say, I was just gonna cry just now. So that shows how emotional I am. But I just wanted to answer this because also what I want to say is that I am a manager, but I'm not the boss, right? So what I want to say here is that if my own boss doesn't provide me also the safety, so to speak, for me to be able to show up that way, then it doesn't cripple down either, right? So I also have the luck, so much luck I feel, to really be able to be told actually, hey, what you're feeling actually and what you're seeing, let's go there, and in a safe space in a way. Because when we talked about embodying what is this generative space and how do we tap into it and how do we feel it's happening, the only way I can actually do my work, and it's very personal, I'm not saying it has to be for everyone, but for me it happens when I feel safe, when I feel enough, that it's not about the fact that I have to be a certain way or whatever. I am actually my best self at that moment. I just can really tap into another kind of wisdom that is very special. The thing is that to cultivate that, even in myself, even if the conditions around me are safe, we have been struggling as human beings, everywhere in the world with self-worth, with wounds, with all of those things. So I also have to keep myself in check all the time to also not scare my own self, even if outside there is nothing, but also how do I not scare my own self? So anyways, I just wanted to share this. I'm done speaking. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Florentina. And I'm thinking about how often, when we use the words leader and manager, there is a connotation of some kind of a top-down or upfront or flag-waving thing. And for me, leadership is so much more connected to that idea of servant leadership and holding from the back and tilling the soil and all that invisible work which can't be measured, and this love that Eva spoke about. How do we measure that if not in bodily sensations and all of that mushiness that's intangible and sometimes not even describable. It's like a body sensation. And we've come to almost to the top of the hour, and I'm going to be negotiating with Eva and Florentina, because I would love for us to continue this next week, or if we can't do next Tuesday, the week following. But I wish we could go on, and an hour has just flown by, and I would have loved to hear another round from everyone, but we have to kind of move to closing now. So I would like to thank everyone so much for joining us today. Please stay connected with our news. Follow this club if you haven't already, so you get notified for the next time. You can see all of our Presencing Institute programs, free and paid, by going to the presencing.org website. We have the Gaia Journey coming up on the 27th of May. The Global Forum on the 15th and the 16th, and it's going to be a very much audio-based experience, so please look out for that. You can sign up for our newsletter on our various website pages, and if you have anything you would like to send to the moderators and panelists, you can send us a DM, which is a direct message on Twitter or on Instagram, which you'll find in our bios. So we welcome questions, suggestions, critiques, other things you would like to speak about in the future. And so see you again next week at this time in this room, and take care, everyone. Thank you so much for joining, and see you soon. Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.